you've won. By every measure that matters in the material world, you've already won. The money is there. The security is locked in. The options are unlimited. You can do anything. And yet, there's a question that arrives quietly, not with crisis, not with loss, but after success has already been secured. A question that money cannot answer. What does all of this actually mean? Not financially, psychologically, historically. This is the unspoken tension that destroys more legacies than market crashes ever will. This is what happens when wealth outlives meaning. For most of human history, wealth solved one problem: survival. Food, shelter, safety, the ability to continue existing. Once those were secured, meaning followed naturally. Survival itself gave life shape and direction. But something fundamental has changed. For a small group of people, those who have already won the economic game, wealth no longer answers the most pressing question. It merely removes the loudest ones. What remains is quieter and far more difficult to articulate. By the time wealth reaches a certain scale, it stops behaving like a solution. It starts behaving like an amplifier. It amplifies visibility, more eyes watching. It amplifies scrutiny, more judgment coming. It amplifies expectation, more responsibility landing. And eventually, it amplifies a question that money cannot answer. What, exactly, does all of this mean beyond me? This question is rarely spoken aloud. Not because it's unimportant, but because it feels indulgent, unreasonable, even ungrateful. After all, when so much has been achieved, what right does one have to feel unsettled? And yet, the feeling persists. Most people assume this unease is personal, a psychological weakness, a character flaw. It is not. It is structural. It emerges whenever wealth outpaces meaning, when resources compound faster than the story that justifies them. At that point, success becomes fragile in a new way, not financially, psychologically, historically, because wealth alone does not decide how a life is remembered. History is not written in balance sheets. Most fortunes do not collapse when money disappears. They collapse when the story holding them together weakens. Every lasting enterprise begins with a reason that goes beyond profit. That reason may be simple or complex, personal or public. It explains why the work exists and why effort continues during difficult periods. At first, the founder carries this explanation instinctively. Decisions align because the purpose lives in one mind. Direction feels natural. Over time, the operation grows. Teams expand. Structures multiply. The work becomes distributed. The explanation does not. When meaning remains undocumented and unstated, it stays dependent on presence. Others execute tasks without fully understanding the reason behind them. The organization still functions. Results still appear. Yet coherence begins to thin. People start interpreting the purpose for themselves. Interpretations diverge. This stage rarely creates immediate damage. Creates variation, small inconsistencies in judgment, conflicting priorities, decisions that make sense locally but weaken the whole. The story fragments. Public perception grows vague. Internally, justification becomes harder to articulate. Leaders answer questions with references to history rather than clarity about direction. Eventually, no one can explain the work without pointing backward. A story that relies on memory rather than structure fades. At that point, the fortune becomes vulnerable, not to markets or regulation, to reinterpretation. Others step in to define the meaning that was never secured. This vulnerability becomes catastrophic during succession. Succession is often treated as a technical problem. Legal arrangements, ownership transfer, governance structures, these matter. They do not solve the real issue. What transfers most poorly is identity. When a founder steps back, successors inherit control without conviction. They receive assets and responsibility without a shared understanding of why those assets exist. This creates pressure. They are expected to steward something they did not build, for reasons they did not define. In response, many successors change direction quickly. Some modernize aggressively. Others freeze operations to avoid blame. Both responses stem from the same absence: orientation. Without a clear identity, succession becomes improvisation. Each generation adjusts according to its own assumptions. The original intent dissolves into preference. Conflict follows, not always openly. It shows up as hesitation, fragmentation, and quiet disagreement. Employees sense uncertainty. Partners adapt cautiously. Momentum slows. The fortune still exists. Its influence weakens. This pattern repeats across families, firms, and institutions. The problem is not capability. It is the lack of a shared reason to preserve continuity. There is a particular trap that ensnares most builders. Builders create momentum through presence. Their influence comes from judgment applied in real time. Decisions move quickly because authority is concentrated. Direction feels clear because one person carries it. In the early phase, this works well. Speed matters. Adaptation matters. Personal intuition fills gaps that structure cannot yet support. The trap appears later. As scale increases, presence becomes a requirement rather than an advantage. The operation depends on continued involvement. Absence creates hesitation. People wait. They wait for approval, correction, or reassurance. Decisions slow when the builder steps away. Initiative weakens when certainty depends on proximity. The builder becomes central in a way that feels necessary. This dependency is rarely planned. It grows through habit. Each correct decision reinforces the belief that judgment must remain personal. The system adapts around the builder instead of replacing the builder with structure. At that point, strength begins to limit growth. Builders often sense this tension. They notice exhaustion. They notice that stepping back creates confusion. They respond by staying closer. More meetings, more oversight, more involvement. The work continues. Fragility increases. The builder holds the operation together through effort. The effort becomes permanent. What once felt like control starts to feel like obligation. Presence solves problems quickly. Permanence solves them repeatedly. These are different functions. Presence relies on attention. Permanence relies on design. Builders tend to favor presence because it delivers immediate results. When a problem appears, they step in. The issue resolves. Confidence grows. The pattern repeats. Over time, problems stop being addressed at the source. They wait for intervention. The organization learns to depend on correction rather than prevention. Permanence requires a slower process. It asks different questions. It replaces individual judgment with shared understanding. This shift feels uncomfortable. It reduces the sense of personal importance. It removes the visible role of the builder in daily resolution. Many resist it, yet permanence creates freedom. When intent is embedded into systems, absence no longer causes disruption. Decisions remain consistent. Direction holds. The builder becomes less visible. The work becomes more stable. This transition marks a dividing line. Some remain builders indefinitely. Their influence ends when their presence ends. Others accept reduced visibility. Their work continues without them. History tends to remember the second group differently. Recognition offers a substitute for meaning. It feels close enough to satisfy, at least briefly. Applause signals importance. Visibility signals relevance. Invitations suggest value. The effect fades quickly. Recognition expires. Attention shifts. The cycle resets. Many respond by seeking more recognition, broader platforms, higher status, louder affirmation. The result disappoints again. Recognition answers one question. Meaning answers another. Being seen confirms presence. Purpose explains existence. One refreshes constantly. The other stabilizes. Visibility alone does not prevent replacement. Another figure can occupy the same space. Systems built on attention do not require specific individuals. This realization unsettles many people. The deeper concern is not obscurity. It is replaceability. Lasting influence resists substitution. It embeds intent into structure. Institutions persist because they carry purpose, not because they attract attention. When intent remains personal, recognition turns into performance. Performance demands repetition. Over time, applause loses its effect. External validation continues, while internal clarity does not. A question sharpens. What remains when attention moves on? This question does not threaten. It invites examination. Few people receive guidance for this stage. Power and wealth do not teach it. Meaning requires direct engagement. Avoidance delays the work. Recognition cannot complete it. Legacy is not what you attach to wealth at the end. It is the meaning that was embedded while the wealth was being built. When that meaning remains personal, unspoken, undocumented, unstructured, it dies with the individual who carries it, no matter how large the fortune. This is why so many second and third generations struggle, despite having every material advantage. They inherit assets but not orientation, control but not conviction, responsibility but not rationale. They are asked to steward something whose why was never institutionalized, and so they improvise. History rarely forgives improvisation at scale. Wealth solves survival. Power secures control. But meaning must be designed. It must be articulated, documented, embedded into systems, shared with successors, tested against time. When it is not, wealth eventually outlives it. And what remains is merely something that exists. The work of legacy is not glamorous. It does not generate recognition. It requires clarity about purpose. It demands that you articulate why the work matters beyond your own lifetime. It requires that you build systems that carry that purpose forward without your presence. This is the difference between builders who are remembered and builders who are forgotten. Not the size of their fortune, the clarity of their meaning, not the scale of their power, the structure of their intent. The unease you feel after success is not weakness. It is an invitation to move from presence to permanence, from personal power to structural intent. From recognition to meaning. Most people ignore it. They stay busy. They seek more visibility. They expand their empires. And they watch quietly as their influence begins to fade the moment they step away. The question remains, what will you do when the spotlight moves on? Will your work continue? Will your meaning persist? Will your legacy outlive your presence? Or will your wealth outlive your meaning? The choice is yours. But the time to choose is now, not after success, during it, because meaning is not added at the end. It is embedded from the beginning.